In the high-octane history of NASCAR, there are winners. There are losers, and then there's Henry Smokey Yunick. To some, he was a mechanical genius, a wizard who could squeeze horsepower out of a stone. To others, specifically the NASCAR rulebook writers, he was a nightmare. A man who didn't just read between the lines. He lived there. Smokey operated out of Daytona Beach, Florida, at the self-proclaimed best damn garage in town. His philosophy was simple, unrepentant, and legendary. All those other guys were cheating 10 times worse than us, so it was just self-defense. The mid-1960s was an era of aerodynamic warfare. Ford had their slick fastbacks. Chrysler had the mighty Hemi. Chevrolet, however, was stuck with the Chevelle. A great street car, but on the superspeedways like Daytona, it had the aerodynamics of a cinder block. It pushed too much air, it was unstable at 180 miles per hour, and it was losing. Smokey, a diehard Chevy man, took this personally. The rulebook said the car had to be a stock 1966 Chevelle body. It said the wheelbase had to be a certain length. It had pages and pages of restrictions. But Smokey looked at that rulebook and asked a question that no one else dared to ask. How much of a Chevelle does it really have to be? The answer to that question led to the most audacious, controversial, and brilliant race car ever built. A ghost car that shouldn't have existed. The legend of the 7/8 scale Chevelle. The premise sounds like a cartoon. The myth goes that Smokey took a brand new Chevelle and somehow shrunk it. That he built the entire car to 7/8 scale of the original. Now let's be clear, Smokey was a master storyteller and he loved to exaggerate. Whether the car was exactly 7/8 is debatable, but what he actually did to that car was perhaps even more impressive than the myth. He didn't just shrink it, he re-engineered reality. To make a brick cut through the air, you have to make it smaller and smoother. Smokey started with the body. He realized that if you stood 10 feet away, your eye couldn't tell if a roofline was an inch lower or a fender was an inch narrower. He allegedly cut the roof off. He sliced sections out of the pillars, lowering the overall profile and welded it back on. But you can't just lower the roof. The glass won't fit. So, the story goes, he had custom windshields and rear glass made, just slightly smaller than stock, to fit the new, tighter dimensions. He narrowed the bumpers. He tucked them in so tightly against the bodywork that you couldn't slide a credit card between the chrome and the fender. This eliminated drag-inducing air gaps. He didn't just alter the outside. He looked underneath. The rulebook specified the wheelbase length, the distance from the center of the front wheel to the center of the rear wheel. Smokey couldn't change that number. But the rulebook didn't say where the body had to sit on top of those wheels. Smokey shifted the entire body backward on the chassis and moved the front wheel wells forward. Why? Because it allowed the nose of the car to be lower to the ground, cutting the air better while keeping the rear high to act like a spoiler. It gave the car an aggressive rake stance that was miles ahead of its time aerodynamic understanding. Every seam was smoothed. Every bolt head was flush. It was a masterclass in what we now call aero tweaking, done by a guy in a garage with a welding torch and a vision. When the black and gold number 13 Chevelle arrived at Daytona, the paddock went silent. Other mechanics and team owners gathered around. They stared at it. They walked around it. They scratched their heads. It looked like a Chevelle. It said Chevelle on the grille. But something was wrong. It sat in what enthusiasts call the uncanny valley. It looked absolutely correct, yet your brain knew it wasn't. It was too sleek, too low, too perfect. Then it went out for practice. The stopwatches didn't lie. Smokey's brick was flying. It was keeping pace with the highly developed factory Fords and Chryslers. The establishment panic set in immediately. If this independent mechanic from Daytona beat the factory giants with an outdated Chevy, it would be a PR disaster. Complaints flooded the NASCAR officials' office. "It's too small," cried the Ford teams. "It's not stock," yelled the Chrysler guys. NASCAR czar Bill France Sr. had to act. The inspectors descended on the Daytona 13 car like vultures. In those days, NASCAR inspected body shapes using metal templates. Big silhouettes cut to the shape of a factory car. If the template didn't fit perfectly over the race car's body, you were illegal. They brought out the templates for the 1966 Chevelle. They placed them over the roof. It wasn't even close. The story goes that the templates rocked back and forth on the roof like a teeter-totter. There was daylight everywhere. The car was narrower. It was lower. The fenders didn't match up. By the letter of the law, the car was a complete fabrication. It was a profound, undeniable cheat. The officials told Smokey the car was banned. It would never turn a competitive lap in a NASCAR race. They gave him a laundry list of things to fix, essentially, telling him to build a whole new car. There is a famous legend attached to this moment. It might belong to another one of Smokey's cars, but it fits this story too perfectly to ignore. The story goes that after the inspectors failed the car on 10 different counts, including the fuel tank capacity, they furiously told Smokey, "Hey, get that illegal piece of junk out of here." Smokey, without missing a beat, jumped into the driver's seat, started the engine, and shouted, "Well, you better check your rulebook again, because you just drained my gas tank." He drove the car back to his garage with no fuel in the tank, proving his fuel lines were holding illegal extra gallons. Whether the 7.8 Chevelle was literally scaled down or just heavily sectioned and chopped doesn't really matter. Smokey Yunick didn't build a race car. He built a rolling middle finger to the establishment. He forced NASCAR to rewrite their entire rulebook to stop one man. He proved that imagination and engineering audacity could terrify the biggest corporations in the world. The car itself disappeared into history, likely cut up or repurposed. But its ghost still haunts the garages of Daytona. Smokey's 7.8 Chevelle remains the ultimate outlaw. A car so good it wasn't allowed to exist.